Hello everybody and welcome to another video here on the Lightstone Planning channel. My name is Jeremy Curtis, Managing Partner here at Lightstone Wealth Planning Solutions. Check out our website at www.lightstoneplanning.com. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I have special interest in, but it's something that affects pretty much everybody. And that has to do with cash flow planning. So you can see here on my left, I've got three things written on my handy whiteboard. I've got three important cash flow planning tools. The first is having a spending plan. The second is to have an emergency fund. And the third is to have a sinking fund. This is what we're going to focus on today, is sinking funds. But just to kind of give some context here, a spending plan is what we typically think of as a budget. I don't love the word budget because it just feels restrictive. A spending plan feels more intentional. Like I have permission to spend my money. I just want to spend it intentionally and not overspend, right? So you can actually plan to spend all of the funds that you have, including spending part of it towards savings. And that's something we could talk more about. There's a lot of tools to help with that, but that's a valuable approach to managing your cash flow. The second thing, though, is to have an emergency fund. This covers those unexpected contingencies, enough funds to cover something unusual in a normal month, maybe unexpected auto repair or healthcare. Over the long term, though, you may want to try to build that emergency fund up to cover more like 3 to 6 months of expenses in the event of something like a job loss. The other thing to look at is sinking funds. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A sinking fund is basically a tool that you can use to smooth out expected known expenses that don't happen very often. So this is like every 6 months, I know I got to pay a big premium on a life insurance policy, or every year I pay a big premium, or it might be every 6 months I'm paying a premium on an auto insurance policy. This might be other expenses that you know that happen infrequently but have some certainty to them, like birthday gifts for a child or a spouse or another loved one. This could also cover things like saving for Christmas gifts. So when those things come around, a lot of times they really throw the budget off. So we wanted to intend to sort of save a fixed amount every month. And we find that that's hard to do because there's always something coming up. Well, a sinking fund is a way to help to control some things that you know are going to come up that just happen infrequently, that don't happen on a monthly basis. So we'll talk more about that today. Enjoy our video. Check out our website at www.lightstoneplanning.com, and hope this is helpful.
I love to draw a picture. Here we go. First thing everybody needs to know is that we all need to have a spending plan. We already talked about how basically that's just another way to describe, in a little bit more friendly terms, the idea of a budget. So just for the sake of discussion, let's create a very simple example of a spending plan. Let's say that under normal circumstances, you spend about $8,500 per month. This might include things like your home mortgage or rent, utility bills, groceries, entertainment, and even things like tithing or payroll taxes. One interesting way to think about cash flow planning is in terms of an equation. On the top line, you have your gross income. The next thing you do is subtract out payroll taxes. Then you have any other things that you might take off the top. Some people pay tithing straight out of their gross. And that leaves the income that I like to think of as your take home. So this is the actual cash that you get deposited in the bank that you have full use of after you've paid taxes and made any donations that you feel like are important to make off the top. From this are subtracted your expenses. So expenses might include the types of categories that we listed above. But the problem is that what we actually often run into is uneven expenses. We have lumpy expenses that make it really hard to save because occasionally something will come up that's not smooth. Maybe it's not something we were anticipating, and it ends up throwing off our budget. So let's look at some examples of this. Let's assume on the left we have the dollars or the amount of money, and across the bottom we have time. So we're just listing out these numbers represent different months just for the sake of our discussion. Let's say this is months 1 through 12. We're kind of shortening it up here for the sake of space. As we kind of plot this out, you realize that in some months our expenses are higher, and some months they're a little bit lower. So what we're really trying to control is for those high, sort of lumpy, outstanding expenses that throw things off. So the next thing we want to draw in here is what our typical take-home income looks like. The shaded blue area is the income that we have that's in excess of our expenses. So in any month where we have a surplus of income or a surplus of take-home above and beyond what we spent, we have savings. In any month where the red bars are above the blue area, those are months where we've had overspending. In other words, we spent more than we earned. Well, how do you spend more than you earn? Well, there's two ways to do that. Either by debt, where you're spending on a credit card or taking out a loan to spend money that you don't have or don't have yet, or where you're reducing your savings, you're spending cash that you've already saved up. You can see one example here of where the bar reaches all the way up to the take-home, so there was no savings that month. This is really where sinking funds come into play. So let's recreate our chart here. Except what you can do with the sinking fund, if you know you have an expense coming up in a few months, instead of waiting for that month and just trying to figure out how to pay for it all at once, you can smooth that expense out by assuming that a part of it needs to be saved for in each month that precedes the expense. So what that looks like is over time, gradually you set aside a little bit of money and then you add to it each month so that by the time you reach the date of the expense, you're able to pay it in full. What happens after that is that you continue to save for the next time that that expense is due. Let's assume in this example that you had an expense that was $1,200 that was due in 4 months. Well, if you had 4 months to save $1,200, you'd need to save $300 each month, and you could see that amount accruing in a savings account on our bar chart. 300, then 600, then 900, then 1,200. After you make your $1,200 payment, you can change how much you're saving every month. Why? Well, now you don't just have 4 months until it's due. If this is something that's due every 6 months or twice a year, then now that you're at the 6-month mark, you have a full 6 months to save for the next time it's due. So instead of saving $300 every month, you can now save $200 every month, which we've shown starting to accumulate, 200, then 400, then 600, and so on. Once that expense rolls around again in 6 months, you'll have the $1,200 that's needed to make that payment. So basically, the idea of a sinking fund is to save the same amount every month up until the due date, and then to drain the fund to pay the expense off, and then to save again incrementally each month for the next time that expense is due. The big secret sauce value of using sinking funds is that you can have incremental, even saving until the due date of an expense. That is, in fact, what a sinking fund is all about. Gradually saving and then spending it, gradually saving and then spending it, and so on. So how does this help to smooth out our budget? Well, let's redraw our graphic. Let's assume in this case that we still have our expenses, but you'll notice the baseline is flat. It's smoothed out because those big lumpy expenses that we had every once in a while, maybe at Christmas time or on our birthday or on the due date of an every 6-month payable insurance policy, all of these expenses have been smoothed out so that each month we're setting aside a small incremental amount towards those goals. Using sinking funds can allow us to smooth out some of those big lumps in our budget and have more control over anticipating how much we'll save and how much we'll spend each month.
If you found this video helpful, please click that like and subscribe button below. Also, I want to show you real quick how you can calculate the amount that you need to save each month to start utilizing a sinking fund. I'll do that by showing you something I've got on the whiteboard. Let's take a look at how a sinking fund is calculated. Here's the formula. Basically, you take the total payment amount that's due at some point in the future and you divide it by the number of months to the due date. Let's say that this is something that you had to pay every 6 months. So twice a year you paid a certain dollar amount, and let's say you're 3 months from the due date. If you wanted to set this up, what you would say is, let's say I've got a $3,000 payment, and I've got to make this payment 2 times per year, but the next time that it's due is in 3 months. If it's due in 3 months, $3,000 divided by 3 months, I need to save $1,000 per month, set that aside as part of my budget. So for the next 3 months, I'm going to do $1,000 per month, and that will give me the $3,000 that I need at the time that that payment is due. From that point forward, though, I will change my sinking fund because now that I'm at that due date, the next due date or the next anniversary payment would be in 6 months. You know, we said in the example here that this is a $3,000 payment that you pay twice a year. If that's the case, then what you would do is say, now that I've met my payment, now I've got 6 months until it's due. And so $3,000 divided by 6 months, I'm no longer saving $1,000 every month. I only have to save $500 per month, setting aside those dollars as part of my monthly budget. The nice thing about that is that now in perpetuity, I can just simply always allocate $500 per month, and every 6 months it will come due and it will be ready to go at $3,000 for the total payment that needs to be made. Of course, this also works for other types of payments. So let's say that you wanted to set aside a certain dollar amount for Christmas every year. Just for easy numbers, let's just erase this here. Let's say that for an upcoming Christmas in 12 months, let's say you just had Christmas and you got a fresh new year and you're trying to set your budget up. Let's say that you wanted to set aside $2,400 for Christmas. Okay, if you wanted to do that and you've got 12 months, pretty easy math here, 2,400 divided by 12 months, you just need to set aside $200 per month. So the nice thing about this is it smooths out this lump, this $2,400, into a monthly expense that you can account for each month in your budget. So you'll basically save that into an account, keep track of that amount, set it apart, distinct from your other funds that you're using for normal monthly expenses. And by the time you reach that goal, reach Christmas, for example, here, you'll have $2,400 accumulated that you can already designate for the purpose of buying those gifts. So what this basically does, as we've talked about before, is it takes otherwise lumpy expenses and instead it gives you a more normalized, smooth budget to work with. Now the expenses may be a little bit higher each month than the baseline down here because you're setting some aside right here, right? You're setting some aside every month. So you may have a little bit higher baseline, but that's kind of the point. You want to have a smooth expense horizon so that you know exactly how much you can actually save each month and how much you're actually spending each month by smoothing out some of these big known and expected future expenses into smaller incremental monthly payments.
If you found any of this helpful, please give us a big thanks by clicking that like, subscribe, or share button below. That really means a lot to us and it helps us out on YouTube.